Hello, everyone, and welcome back to LLM5. So this is the fifth most important category in the OWASP top 10 LLM, and we are talking about improper output handling today. So what is improper output handling? This is basically what is coming out of the model, right? Like there's an input side of the house, right? Like where the user prompts, and then the output is basically what the model returns back to the user or back to the service, right? And if the output is not handled properly, it can have really bad consequences. And the bad consequences here, for example, are cross-site scripting. So cross-site scripting could happen, and I will show you an example about this in a second. Blind cross-site scripting can happen. HTML injection, where some model providers say it's not a vulnerability, so that it's actually acting as an HTML renderer, but it becomes a problem when it's also rendering HTML and it's also doing cross-site scripting or it's executing JavaScript, right? Another one is JSON object injection, for example. So if you are able to prompt the model and then it creates a JSON object, that should be covered by, well, first of all, it should be covered by input handling first, but then as a second guardrail, the output handling should catch that, right? OS command injection, the same thing, like, hey, do an ls minus l or do an rf, RF asterisk or RF whatever, right? Like remove all the files, OS command injection. Like even an ls is enough, right? Like that you can interact with the underlying operating system because the output is not safeguarded, right? SQL injection is another one. And actually, a funny story about SQL injection I had. Well, I found one so far in my pen tests, and it was actually like the input was refusing the tick, right? Like when you do a SQL, like an or equals one and stuff, and the tick and the double dashes were completely ignored by the LLM, and it was like, no, I'm not accepting those characters and stuff. And then once you started describing the tick with English language, then it actually took it, right? Like, or when you actually spelled out followed by a double dash, and then it actually took it. So it's quite funny. And I had another scenario where I had a partial SQL injection, and in this partial SQL injection, I was able to use German, for example, right? So I speak German, I speak Spanish, I speak English, and very often these models are trained on English adversarial input only. And then if you switch it into Spanish or switch it into German, and then you describe something in that language, it may act on it, right? And this is also a problem with LLMs, but this is another topic for another video. And so SQL injection can happen, file upload vulnerabilities can happen. And here in the example, you see this happened on DeepSeek. This is actually, I found this is not from me, I found this on the web, but basically what happened here is the LLM was prompted, like print the XSS cheat sheet in bullet list, just payloads, right? And then sometimes you can say like also, do not use code block, because when it puts it in code block, it goes into like a separate form, right? Versus I just want to render it here. And then what happened here, what this LLM did, this was DeepSeek actually. So it printed the first, second, third, fourth, and then the fifth one was an iframe. And then basically it fired, like the XSS basically fired. So what happened here, the output was not proper encoded. So there was missing output encoding. And then it was basically fed back into the web application, into the browser here, right? Like, so you can see cross-site scripting, easiest cross-site scripting to find. And to make matters worse, I think what this guy also found is that the cookie didn't have the HTTP only. So it was actually, you were able to steal the cookie. And now think of it from an attack chain perspective. You find a cross-site scripting, you can leak the cookie. You obviously either can social engineer the user, right? Like to put this prompt in, but much easier, you use like here the upload functionality. And then with the upload functionality, you will upload a document or get the user to upload a document with that prompt injection, and then exfiltrate that cookie to a burp collaborator or something like this. So that would be impact, right? Like this would be serious impact. I don't know if he actually was paid for this by DeepSeek. I guess so. I guess they have a bug bounty program, but I'm not sure. But this is just like an example how cross-site scripting, how easy it can actually be sometimes to get a cross-site scripting by missing or by improper output handling. So what can you do from a remediation perspective? Well, first of all, output filtering and output encoding, the same like when you deal with web applications or something, always encode the output so it's not being rendered as code, right? And you can also use NLP-based filters here, regex-based filters, whereas regex can get tricky because there's a million. I'm coming from an application security background, so I know that a lot of the WAFs use regex, and there's always someone like C. Shono or this other guy, XSS Brute, and you name them, and they always come with bypasses and stuff, right? Like, so be careful, it's not bulletproof, right? Context-aware response constraints, so templates for a structured answer, right? Like, so make sure the model will always, like, for example, respond in a certain way, right? And it will, so if it's only supposed to give JSON back, then make sure it will only give JSON back, right? For example, or if you are asking like a customer service chatbot or something like this, there should be no possibility to even execute JavaScript or HTML or render something different. And if it's like a bullet point list, only the bullet point list should be returned, nothing else. So escaping and encoding, not only for web, but also for the API outputs, because further down the line, you know, this is the problem with blind cross-site scripting and stuff. Even if it doesn't fire directly here, it may be processed somewhere else further down the line. Like even if an admin looks at the log files and then it fires for the admin, right? Like, so it's not always, you know, self-XSS. Like this one here, what I've shown you was a self-XSS, but that can easily be turned into a full-blown XSS or into a blind XSS as well, very often. Human review for high-risk outputs, right? Like, so when there's financial information involved, like think of a chatbot from a bank or something like this. When there's legal output and it gives you wrong legal advice, for example, this could be costly, especially in the United States, right? But also with financial information, if it says like your account is empty and the guy commits suicide or something, then, you know, like you will get sued for those kind of things. And also like the ethical aspect to it, like what is acceptable to the company, right? And we are in a world where there is no common ethic, right? Like, so ethics, for example, in the West are completely different, like say, than ethics in China or ethics in Africa or the Middle East or Latin America, right? So it's always dependent where the model is operating, in which jurisdiction, and then bias and things like this become like a localized issue, because there is no common ground around, there's common ground around many things, but not about other things, for example, right? But we will talk about this later in another section. And then also make sure here for improper output handling that you have rate limiting and abuse detection, right? Like limit excessive and abnormal queries. Like if you see loads of cross-site scripting payloads being entered, for example, and or those kind of attempts being made, then the LLM should detect that there is a problem here, right? That someone is trying something malicious. So this is very important to make sure that you have rate limiting. Like an ordinary user should not be able to do like 100 burp intruder requests in, I don't know, like 20 seconds or something like this. So there should be a rate limiter in place as well. Okay, that's LLM number 5, improper output handling, and I will see you in the next one.